Hey, what's going on guys, Toty here, and welcome back to another Minecraft modding tutorial for version 1.15. In this tutorial we're going to be going over a basic tile entity. So this tile entity isn't going to have a container or a screen / GUI, it's just going to be a basic tile entity, and I will cover containers and GUIs in separate videos, as I don't really want to squish it all into one or have a mini series for it. I think it's better if I cover them separately so you understand how each one works a bit better and I have more time to explain it. So I have already initialized the block because you should know how to do that right now. Everyone up to this point should know how to create a block, and they should know how to create a block with a new class. So I have my quarry there and my quarry block here. So I'm going to be creating a quarry if you haven't already seen, and I've registered the block item. Don't worry about this crop stuff, that's just something I am testing. So yeah, so now we have initialized that, we can come out of our block init class and go into our block quarry class. So if we open that, as you can see, for now I've just set it to be a normal old block, but in here we're going to want two methods. So we're going to want hasTileEntity, and that's going to be the one that takes in the block state, and this is just going to return true because obviously our block is going to have a tile entity. And we're going to want createTileEntity, and for this we're going to be using our class which we're going to create in a second. So that is going to be modTileEntityTypes, and it doesn't really matter what you name this, but that's just what I'm naming it. And then that's going to be .quarry, .get, .create. Now obviously don't worry if you have an error here because we haven't created this class yet. So let's go into our init package, and we're going to create our new class, and this is going to be modTileEntityTypes. Now for tile entities I'm going to be using a slightly different system, and I'll show you how you can use this system for blocks and items in a future episode, but I'm going to be using something called Deferred Registries instead of object holders. So Deferred Registries are just a lot simpler. You don't have to create a null field before it. You basically just create the list of deferred registries, and then you create the registry objects below. It's a lot simpler. It means that it's a one-line and initialization, which is just a lot simpler really. So to do this we need a public static final deferred register, and that is going to take in the thing that we want to register. So we're going to be registering tile entity types, so that will just be tile entity type, and we're going to put a question mark in there, and we're going to name this tile_entity_types, and that is going to be equal to a new deferred register. If I could actually spell. That's not going to take in anything for the generics, but the first variable is the thing that we want to register, as in the forge registry. So that is simply just forge registries, and then you got all these different things, so you can basically create a deferred registry for any of these things. As you can see there's quite a lot, but we want, if I can find it, we want tile entities, and then the mod ID is obviously your mod ID. So that's going to be tutorial mod.modID. Just import tile entity type and Deferred Registries and our main class. And then below this we just create the registry object. So this is the actual object. So that is just a public static final registry object, and that's going to take in tile entity type, which is then going to take in our tile entity class. So that is going to be, for me, it's going to be quarry tile entity. And we're just going to name this quarry, and we're going to set that equal to tile entity types dot register, and we're going to register the registry name, which is going to be quarry, and then the supplier of the tile entity type, and that's just tile tile entity type dot builder, and we're just going to remove these generics because we don't want them. And then that's going to be dot create, and we're going to create quarry tile entity colon new, and then this is the block for the tile entity, so that is just block init dot quarry, and then after that you can do dot build, and that's going to take in null. So obviously we have some errors here because we haven't created this tile entity class yet, but we can now go back into our block class and just import that, and yes, we named it uppercase dot gets. Why is it not liking that then? I think it's because we have these errors here. So what we can do to fix this is obviously create our tile entity class. So for this I have created a new package in our com.username.modName, and I have called that tile entity, and in here we're going to want our quarry tile entity class, just like that. And in here this class is going to extend tile entity, and it's going to implement, well for me it's going to implement tickable tile entity, because I want it to do something every tick. If you don't want it to do something every tick, don't implement this, otherwise it will tick, and that would just be a waste if you're not intending to actually use it. So in here we just create the constructor. So let's add constructor, just like that. Get rid of that comment. And I'm just going to change this to final, as we don't want that to be modified. And then I'm going to create another constructor. Okay, and this one is going to take in this of mod tile entity types dot quarry dot get, just like that. And we should be able to import these now, and we should no longer have an error there, meaning we no longer have an error there or in here. That's presuming I didn't type an S. Actually we need to return this, don't we? Oops. Return. There we go. And obviously because we have our this interface right here, we are going to need a tick method. But before we do that, I think it's worth creating these variables. So for the quarry, we're going to want a public int, and we're going to have x, y, z, and tick, just like that. And we're going to want boolean initialized, and that by default that is going to be set to false unless we make it true. Then we're going to want our tick method. And in here, this is basically everything you want to do every tick. So in here, we're going to check that it is initialized by doing if not initialized. We're going to call an init method, which we haven't created yet, but don't worry about that. And then we can do tick plus plus. And then we can do if tick is equal to 40. So I want to basically run this machine every 40 ticks. Then we want to set the tick equal to 0 so that it starts again. And then if y is greater than 2, we want to call this execute function. Which we obviously haven't created yet either. So what is this doing? This is checking first that it is initialized, and if it's not initialized, it will call this init function, which we're going to create in a second. And then after that check, it's going to increment the ticks up here by 1. And then if the tick is equal to 40, then we're going to want to set it back to 0 so that we can then run through this again, the next tick. And then if the y is greater than 2, so if this is greater than 2, then we're going to want to execute. Obviously, this is never incremented at any point, and obviously this is always going to be not initialized at the start. So let's go ahead and create these functions. So first we're going to just create the execute. So let's just create that method, and private void, yep, that is correct. And in here I'm just going to first do int index is equal to 0. And then we're going to want a block array of blocks removed. So we are storing all of the blocks that were removed, and actually we want to set that to a new block of 9. So what this does is it creates an empty array with 9 spaces, because I'm going to be doing a query of 3 by 3. Obviously, say you wanted 5 by 5, you would have to set this to 25. If you wanted, I don't know, 7 by 2, you'd set it to 14. You get the point. But I'm going to be setting it by 9 because I'm doing a 3 by 3. Then you can do for int x is equal 0. X is less than 3. X plus plus. And then in here we want a for int z is equal 0. Z is less than 3. Z plus plus. And in here we're going to actually do the functionality code. So we want block pos, and we're going to call that pos to break, and then it's going to equal to a new block pos of this dot x plus x, this dot y plus y, and this dot z plus z. Actually, that is wrong. We are not adding y. We don't add y because we're not looping through the y values. So let's just import block pos, and there you go. Then we can do blocks removed of index is going to be equal to this dot world dot get block state of pos to break dot get block. And then we can do destroy block, which we haven't created yet either. So that's going to be destroy block, and that's going to take in pos to break, true, and null. And then we just want to do index plus plus. And and at the end here we can do this dot y negative negative, so that we can go down. So let me explain this to you. So first we are creating the int index, so that is basically the amount of times it has run. So obviously by default we want to set that equal to 0. Then in here we are creating our block array of the blocks that are to be removed. Then we are doing a 3 by 3 but on the X and Z. So obviously if you want to change this to 7 by 7 or 4 by 10 or 3 by 5 or whatever, you would do X is less than 3, X is less than 5, X is less than 10, X is less than 15, whatever sizes you want, but I just want a 3 by 3 area, hence that is what we are putting in here as 9. So you can do your own custom maths for how your query actually works, but this is how I'm doing it. I know this isn't the best way because it is quite laggy, but I think it's just a bit more exciting for a tutorial rather than seeing it break each individual block. But obviously you can do that if you want as well, and that's totally up to you. Then in here we are creating the block pos, which is going to be the pos position that we want to break. So that is obviously going to be this dot x, and then we're going to add this x value, and then it's going to be this dot y, which is just the y value, and then this dot z with this z value added. Then we are setting the block at the index right here to be this dot world dot get the block state at the pos to break, and then we're getting the block of that. Then we are going to be calling this destroy block method, which we haven't created yet, but we will do that soon, and that is just taking in our position that we want to break, a boolean which is true, and that's basically a boolean to drop the block or not, and then the entity, which we are setting to null, and that is fine because that is a nullable variable. And then we are just incrementing the index by 1 so that we can change to the next block removed. And after all of that has happened, we are decreasing the y so that we can go all the way down until the y is not greater than 2. So obviously now we need to go ahead and create this destroy block function. So let's just create that, and instead of object, that is actually let's just rename that, so we can do at nullable entity, and just import those two from net.minecraft.entity.entity. You need to make sure you're getting the right imports. I've seen people with a lot of issues to do with getting the wrong import. You need to make sure you get the right import, otherwise you're going to have lots of errors, and that's very important that you don't have those errors. Here we have the block pos to break, but I'm just going to rename that to pos, and I'm going to rename boolean b to drop block, just like that. So in here, the first thing we want to do is get the state. So to do that, we just do block state. Actually, I'm going to name it block state is equal to world dot get block state of pos. Just import block state. Then we can do if block state dot is air, and that's actually going to take in the world and position because the other one is deprecated. Then we want to return false because obviously we don't want to break it if it's air. That's kind of pointless. Actually, that's a good point. We need to change this void to a boolean so that we can return whether to do it or not, and else we can do the rest of the functionality. So in here we want to first create the iFluid state just to check if it's a fluid or not. So we can do iFluid state, and we can call that iFluid state, and that is going to be equal to world.getFluid state of pos, which obviously could be null. After that we want to play an event, so we want to do world.playEvent, and the type of event is going to be 2001. Next is the pos, and then it's the ID of the block, so that's obviously going to be block.getStateID of our block state. Just so you know, the reason we are choosing 2001, because if we go into this play event method and we go to let's see, play event, if we open the implementation of that, we should be able to see it in the client world. No, the server world maybe. Let's check. If we go into the server world, it's not coming up with what it's meant to do. Oh no, that's because it's that one, right? No, it's not coming up. But basically that is the one to play the sound of the block being broken. Hence we are passing in the state, which makes it know which sound it's to play. And then we need to do if drop blocks. So if we want to drop the block, then we're going to run this piece of code right here. And first that is tile entity, and we're going to call that tile entity is equal to block state dot has tile entity question mark world.getTileEntity of pos, and then colon null. And then we can spawn the drops, so we can do block.spawn drops, and that is going to take in the block state, the world, this.pos, and I'm just going to add 0, 1.5, 0, and tile entity, and item stack.empty. And finally you want to return, if we come outside of this one, we want to return world.set block state of pos iFluid state .get block state. Oh, it's messed that up there. iFluid state.get block state, and the flag, which is free. So if we just check here, free, oh, it doesn't say what free is. I don't remember what free was. I think it's update fluids, if I remember correctly, but that might be wrong. So let me just explain this code right here. So the first thing we are doing is getting the block state at our position, and then we are checking if the block state is air. If the block state is air, then we want to return false and not destroy the block. If it's not air, then first we're going to get the fluid state at the pos, and then we're going to play the sound event of this block state's block. Then if this drop block variable is true, then we want to get the tile entity. So we can do that by checking if it has a tile entity. If it does, then we want to do world.getTileEntity of the position. Else we want to do just set it to null. Then we can do block.spawn drops, and this is basically the blocks way of spawning drops. If you go into here, you can see how that works, but it's just easier to use that, and that just takes in our state, our world of the tile entity, and this .position.add 1.5 to the y. So we're not adding anything to the X, we're not adding anything to the Z, but we're adding 1.5 to the Y. This means it will spawn it above the block and not in the block, because by default it will spawn it in the middle of the block, which can make it glitch out and shoot everywhere. And then the next thing is the tile entity. So if it has a tile entity, then it will take that in, and basically that will allow it to drop any items the tile entity has, using the block functionality of that. And then entity, I've looked into this. I don't really understand why it takes in the entity, but you need to make sure you pass that in. And then finally is the item stack.empty, which is basically the stack that you want to pass each drop into. So you could have a preset stack if you wanted. And then after that you just want to return the world.setBlockState. So we're just setting the block state of the position to the fluid state, with the flag of free, which I believe updates fluids. Now obviously we still have an error, so to fix that we need to go ahead and create this init method, which is just a private void. So let's create that method. Okay, just like that. And in here we just want to set initialize to true. That's the first thing we want to do. Then we can do this, x is equal to this dot pos dot get x -1. Y is equal to this dot pos dot get y -1. And you guessed it, z is equal to this dot pos dot get z -1. And finally we want to set the tick equal to 0. So that just basically resets all our values when the block is first initialized, when the tile entity is first initialized. And finally we want two more methods in here, and that is the read and write, so that we can save the tick initialized x and y to the block's data, well, the tile entity's data. So the first method you want is write, and this is allowing it to write to NBT. In here we just want compound.put, and we're going to be putting in init values, and then nbt helper dot to nbt, and this, and then we're going to return super dot write compound. Then we're going to want our read method, and in here we just want super.read, so I didn't need to remove that. And then we want to create the compound Mbt, so compound Mbt, and we're just going to call that init values is equal to compound.get compound, and that is init values, as that's what we declared it as right here. Then we're just going to check if init values is null, not that, init values. So if init values is not equal to null, then we want to do this dot x is equal to init values dot get int of x, and then this dot y is equal to init values dot get int, and that is going to be the y value. Then the same for the z, so this dot z is equal to init values dot get int z, and as you can see I messed that up there, so it's just this dot z. Then this dot tick is, Jesus Christ, it keeps coming up with initialize. This dot tick is equal to 0. Initialized is equal to true, because obviously if this is run, the initialize is going to be true. and then just return. And else we just want to call the init method, just like that. Obviously we still have an error because we haven't got an NBT helper class, and that's what I'm going to be creating right now. So inside our util.helpers we're going to want a new class, and we're just going to call this NBT helper. So this is basically going to help us with sorting out our MBT data, and just gives us a few utility methods in here. So this is not going to extend anything or implement anything, so let's just get started. First thing we're going to want is a public static compound Mbt, and we're going to call this method to Mbt. That's going to take in an object which we're just going to name O. In here we're just going to want to check if O is instance of an item stack, and if it is, we're going to want to return write item stack, and just cast item stack, or cast objects to item stack. Obviously that's going to give us an error because we haven't created that method yet, but don't worry, we will in a minute. Then we're going to want to check if O is an instance of our tile entity. So if it's instance of a quarry tile entity, then we can return write quarry, and that's going to cast the quarry tile entity, or the objects to the quarry tile entity, and just import that. And then finally, if it's neither of those, we just want to return null. So that was pretty simple, but next we obviously want these methods here. So first is the public static compound Mbt, and actually not public, we want to create this private as we don't want to be able to do this anywhere else. And the first one is going to be write quarry. That's just going to take in our quarry tile entity, and we're just going to call that O as it's an object. And then we can just do compound Mbt compound is equal to a new compound Mbt, and then compound dot put int, and the first int we want to put in is going to be x, and that is just going to be o.x. Then compound dot put int, and that's going to be our y, which is going to be o.y. And then finally we're just going to want to do compound dot put int, you guessed it, z, and you guessed it once again, o.z. Then you're just going to want to return compound, as it is expecting that to be returned. Next we're going to want write item stack. So this one is going to be slightly different, but also slightly the same. So that's just a private static compound Mbt, and we're going to call that write item stack. That's just going to take in the item stack, and we'll name that I just for simplicity. Once again, you're obviously going to want to create the compound Mbt, and let's just call that Mbt is equal to a new compound Mbt. Then we can just do Mbt.put int, and that is first the count of the stack, and we set that to i.getCount. Then we can do nbt.put string, and that's going to be the item in the stack, which is going to be i.getItem, .getRegistryName, and .toString. So that's the item's registry name. And finally nbt.put byte. The byte that we're going to want to put is the type, and that is going to be a byte of 0, just like that, and just return nbt. Next we're going to want the from Mbt method and read item stack. So just to make this video a bit shorter, as it is already quite long, I'm just going to copy these in, and you can get these from my GitHub. The link is in the description, and that just saves us some time with those methods. Now, the last thing that you need to do is obviously just import our Mbt helper, and you may think we're done, but obviously we're not, because we're not initializing our mod tile entity types. So to do that, we can just go into our main class right here and just do mod tile entity types dot tile entity types dot register and our mod event bus. You need to make sure this is after the client stuff and before we initialize it. Once you have done that, everything is finished. You can go ahead and do the assets, so that is the block state, the texture, the model, and the lang, and the item model. So once you have done those, obviously you can run the game. I'm not going to do those for this block, just to make this a bit shorter. So yeah, let's run the game, and I'll see you guys there. Okay, so as you can see, I am now in the game, and I'm going to find somewhere where I can place this. As you can see over there, I've done a bit of testing. Let's do it right here. Let's do it right here on this tree. If I just place it down, you should instantly see something happen, or at least pretty much instantly within the first second, that is. And it's spawning the blocks on. Sometimes the blocks may fall off, but obviously you could add a hopper or something. You know, you can figure that out. And as you can see, this should pretty much go down to bedrock. Actually, it will go to bedrock. My testing showed that it actually went further than bedrock, because Y2 is yeah, you know, it's like the last layer pretty much. So obviously that's going to go all the way down. It's going to drop all the items, and when it's finished, it will just stop. Obviously when it's finished, you could make it destroy this block, or you could make it start again, whatever you wanted to do. This is just you know, a little test, and obviously you can do whatever you want, but this is just kind of showcasing what you can do with tile entities, and therefore how to make a simple entity, tile entity I mean. As you can see, we're getting iron, we're getting coal. I'm sure we've got coal somewhere. No, we haven't actually got coal yet. As you can see, it's going down, and we're moving along. Now if I exit the game while it's still running, just like this takes a second, there you go. If we load back into the world, it should continue from that point. So let's just check that it continues from the point. Yep, it does. It continues from that point, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you guys did enjoy this tutorial, please be sure to smash your face into that like button, and subscribe, because why not? In the next tutorial, I will either be doing crops, or I will be doing how to register your items and blocks with deferred registries. So I'll be doing one of those two things. I haven't really decided yet. So yeah, I will see you guys in whatever tutorial that is. Good. So yeah, goodbye.